Picture a quiet street. In the afternoon, kids are riding their bikes on the sidewalk. A dog is barking at a mailbox. Neighbors are talking over a wooden fence, and the fresh smell of meat on the grill fills the air. Now, imagine that same street after the disaster. The houses are dark, the windows are broken, and the lawns are filled with tall, yellow weeds, and there are no signs of life. In this video, we'll go through a list of 6 steps to build a convincing end-of-the-world setting. By the end of this video, you'll have everything you need to get started. First, decide what kind of disaster happened, and if it's still going on. This choice changes every single detail of your story. Let's look at the different kinds of disasters. A world ruined by sickness looks totally different from one ruined by war, viruses, or supernatural monsters. Think about what your disaster does to basic things, like roads, buildings, and power lines. A bad sickness kills people, but leaves buildings standing. A war destroys a city's buildings. A world where nature dies might leave people alive in towns, but they can't grow any food. Each choice creates different survivors who have different problems to solve. If a sickness wiped out your world, the streets will be quiet. The houses will still have TVs, clothes in the closets, and family photos on the walls. It'll feel like everyone just walked out of the room and never came back. But if a nuclear war happened, there won't be any houses left. There'll only be piles of concrete and twisted metal. The survivors won't be looking for old diaries or clean clothes. They'll be looking for shelter from the toxic environment. If a giant flood hit the world, the cities might be covered in thick mud and seaweed. Cars will be stuck on top of buildings. The air would smell like old fish and wet wood. Now, think about a world where a massive ice age started. Everything is white and frozen. The survivors have to wear 3 coats just to go outside. They can't use cars because the roads are blocked by 10 feet of snow. They have to burn old books and wooden chairs just to stay warm. These physical details tell your viewers what kind of world this is without you having to explain it in a long speech. The environment itself becomes a character in your story. You also have to decide if the disaster is still happening or if it's over. This timeline changes your whole story. If the world is still ending, the story is about surviving right now. Every scene has a lot of pressure. Food and water are running out, the danger is still moving. Your characters can't stop to think or cry because they're never safe. If a giant storm is tearing up the planet, you have to run, find shelter, and look for supplies before the next wave hits. But a post-apocalypse story is completely different. The immediate danger is mostly gone. Now the story is about what people do next. How do they rebuild? What do they remember? What'll they do to protect the few things they have left? The tension here is slower and very interesting. It shows how people act when they're no longer in constant danger. People have time to look at the ruins of their old lives. They can build small towns, make new rules, and try to grow crops. Instead of an impending disaster, the danger is the other group of survivors down the road who want your food. Both ways of writing are good, but you should choose one before you start writing because it sets the speed, the mood, and the questions your characters must answer. Second, show what the world looked like right before it fell apart. Think about the things we do every day without thinking. We turn on the faucet and clean water comes out. We go to the store and buy food. We use our phones to talk to friends miles away. In an apocalypse, all of that disappears. You don't have to write a long flashback scene to show this. You can show it through the things your characters do. A character could find an old plastic toy in the dirt, but they stop and look at it, remembering when they used to play with toys like that in their clean bedroom. Or they might walk past a billboard that's peeling off. The billboard shows a picture of a happy family eating a giant plate of pancakes at a restaurant. The character hasn't eaten a pancake in 5 years. They stare at the picture and their stomach hurts because they're hungry. Show a character who still remembers the smell of hot coffee in the morning, or a quiet highway that used to be full of noisy cars during rush hour. The past doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, it's better if it wasn't. A world that was already unfair and struggling before the big disaster is much more interesting than a perfect world that fell over in one night. If the old world had poor people who couldn't get help, or if the leaders were corrupt, those problems don't disappear when the bombs drop. They get worse. It makes your characters wonder if the old world was even worth saving. Different characters will have very different answers to that question. Some people might want to rebuild the old government, while others might think the disaster was a chance to start fresh and build something better. Third, decide who survives and why they made it. Think about your world's population. Who is still alive, and what does that tell us about your world? Staying alive when the world ends depends on where you live, what you have, what you know how to do, and who your friends are. The people who survive are usually the ones who had something useful before the end. This could be clean water, medical training, weapons, land, or even a strong group of neighbors. And the people who didn't survive are often the ones whose jobs were only useful in a high-tech world. Before the end, a wealthy business owner might have spent all his time in a tall office building, making phone calls and typing on a laptop. He had a lot of money in the bank, but when the power goes out forever, his laptop is useless. He doesn't know how to grow food, he doesn't know how to build a shelter, and he can't walk 5 miles without getting tired. At the same time, think about a quiet person who worked as a park ranger. She spent her days walking through the forest, learning which plants are safe to eat, and fixing old water pumps. In the old world, she didn't make a lot of money and wasn't famous. But in the new world, she's the most useful person in the group. Everyone looks to her for help because she knows how to stay alive in the woods. This change flips the whole world upside down. A great doctor might be the most useful person alive, or they might have died right away because they lived in a crowded city where the sickness spread fast. A simple farmer who everyone ignored before might suddenly become the most important person for miles around because he's the only one who knows how to grow food without electricity. Someone who used to be rich and powerful might find that their paper money means nothing now that the banks are closed. They can't eat gold, and they can't use a credit card to stop a wild animal. Think about what skills are actually useful after the crash. If your world has no power, can anyone fix a well? Can anyone patch a wound without a hospital? That gap is where your story gets really interesting. Survivors who know they made it because of an unfair advantage often feel a lot of guilt. They wonder why they lived when better people died. Other survivors might feel like they were chosen by a higher power to do something big. Both feelings create very different characters to write about, and they'll clash when they try to live together. Fourth, think about what people do to each other when the rules are gone. This is where many writers get stuck. Some writers make everyone act like wild monsters right away, fighting and hurting each other over everything. Other writers make everyone act perfectly nice, joining together to fight outside threats. Both ideas are flawed. Real life is much messier and more interesting. When the laws disappear, most people don't instantly become evil, but their worlds do get smaller. They focus only on what is close to them, like their own family or their own street. They don't want to be cruel, but they want to protect their own. The circle of people they care about gets very small, and they start to ignore what happens to outsiders. In a normal city, if you see someone shivering in the cold, you might buy them a hot meal or give them an old coat. You do this because you have extra things, and you know you'll be safe. But in a post-apocalypse world, you don't. Imagine you're walking down a ruined road with your little sister. You only have 1 bottle of clean water left, and it has to last you 3 days until you reach the next safe town. You meet a kid who is crying and thirsty. If you give him your water, your sister might get sick from dehydration. If you keep the water for your sister, the other kid will suffer. What do? The average person would keep the water. They'll feel terrible about it, but they'll do it to protect the person they love. This is the kind of writing that makes your apocalypse story feel real and deep. The real horror comes from regular people making hard choices in a broken world where regular choices have terrible results. Think about the moral choices your apocalypse forces people to make. Think about the small things, like the polite habits people stop doing, or how the rules of right and wrong change slowly over time. The changes are so small that nobody notices them until they look back at where they started and realize they become someone they wouldn't recognize. Fifth, determine what takes the place of the government. The leaders are gone. The schools, police, and banks are closed. But that empty space won't stay empty for long. Something always rises to take control. The real question is, what is it, and what kind of world does it build? The most common answer is force. The group with the most guns takes control, makes the rules, and uses threats to keep order. This happens a lot in history, and it's a good way to write it, but it isn't the only option. Power also goes to the people who control resources. Whoever controls the clean water, the food supply, the medicine, or the radios becomes powerful, even if they don't have a lot of weapons. Imagine a town, and after the government fell, a group of ex-soldiers with rifles took over. They protect the town from bandits, but they also take half of everyone's food as a tax. If you don't pay, they throw you out into the wasteland. This is a system built on force. Now imagine another town down the river. There are no soldiers there, but there's a woman named Sarah who knows how to fix the water filter. If Sarah gets frustrated with the town, she can stop fixing the filter and everyone will have to drink dirty water and get sick. Sarah is the leader because she controls the resource everyone needs to live. In a broken world, power belongs to whoever has what everyone else needs. Religion can also fill the empty space. When people lose their old lives, they want to understand why. A leader who offers a clear message, a purpose, and an explanation for the disaster can gather a group faster than someone with a gun. Fear of death is strong, but the need to find meaning in survival is just as strong. People want to feel like their suffering has a point. They'll follow anyone who tells them they're part of a bigger plan. Sometimes communities form around old identities. This could be a neighborhood, a job, or a set of beliefs that people refuse to drop. These groups can be very strong and helpful, but they can also become very dangerous if they decide that all outsiders are enemies. Sixth, Look at what it actually takes to rebuild. Many apocalypse stories end when the main characters survive. The danger is gone, and the characters walk off toward a new home. But the real story of an apocalyptic world doesn't end there. You could make your story different and make it focused on the rebuilding that happens after. In reality, rebuilding is slow, boring, and full of mistakes. Simple things like growing enough crops, finding clean water, keeping people from getting sick, and sharing food fairly are actually very hard. These things require knowledge and tools that took hundreds of years to make, and you can't rebuild them in a single season. If you want to plant corn, you need seeds. And you need to know when to plant them, how to water them, and how to keep bugs from eating them. If you make a mistake, your whole town starves during the winter. Rebuilding a world is like trying to build a house when you don't have any tools or instructions. Imagine you want to fix an old truck so your town can haul wood. You find a truck, but the engine is broken. In the old world, you just take it to a mechanic or watch a video online to learn how to fix it. But now, there's no internet. The nearest mechanic died years ago. You have to open the hood and guess how the parts work. If you put a wire in the wrong place, you might ruin the engine forever. Also, think about the tools themselves. If you need a hammer, you can't just buy one. You have to find a piece of metal and tie it to a wooden stick. This means everything takes much longer to do. Building a simple wooden cabin might take 3 months of hard work. Growing a small field of wheat might take a year. And if a big storm comes and ruins your crops, you have to start all over again. Knowledge dies when people die. Skills that were never written down are simply gone. Entire ideas that took generations to build can be erased because the people who knew them didn't survive. If the only person who knows how to purify water dies before they can teach anyone else, that knowledge is gone. The survivors have to start all over again, guessing and making mistakes that could kill them. A world that's been rebuilding for 10 years would be a totally new world. Some things might actually be better than the old world. Other things will be worse in ways nobody expected. All of it will be shaped by the disaster that started it all. In conclusion, first, choose your disaster and decide if it's ongoing or already over. Show what the world looked like before it broke so the audience understands the loss. Figure out who is still alive and why, because that changes everything. Think about how people act when there are no laws. Keep it realistic, not cartoonish. Decide what takes the place of the government. And lastly, think about what is lost forever when you try to rebuild. If this video helped you, click the like button and leave a comment below. Also, if you want to get started writing your first one-shot manga, head over to mangascript.com to download the one-shot guide. It's a page-by-page breakdown of 3 high-quality manga one-shots, and it makes it 10 times easier to write your own script. And don't forget to join our Discord community. The link is in the description. It's a great place to share your work and connect with fellow creators. Thanks for watching.